Mike Roderick, the SuperConnector to the stars, the magical human being in my life. Thank you for joining me here today. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you. Before we get into some nitty gritty stuff, why don't you tell everybody who you are and who you serve and what
Sure.
you're up to?
Yeah, sure. My name is Mike Roderick. I run a company called Small Pond Enterprises, and I focus on helping thoughtful givers become thought leaders. I help people create what I like to refer to as a referable brand, something that you take your ideas, you package them in such a way that it's much more likely people will remember you. And then I also tie that to how do you do that when also managing and building your relationships.
Yes, and I have firsthand knowledge of all of those fun things from you, having worked with you throughout the years. And for everyone watching this, Mike was a client of mine. I was a client of his. It's all very magical and beautiful. And we recently created some image content for you.
Yes.
And fortunately and happily, I see you starting to pump some of that stuff out, and it makes me feel very warm and fuzzy on the inside when you do that.
Yes.
Um, the first question that I have is why? Why did you feel the need to invest in branded lifestyle portraits to help support your business and your brand?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the aspect of doing photos is always sort of a last minute choice, right? Like you're always kind of in this place of like, oh well, I'll do that later. I can still use this photo here is kind of good enough, right? And there's always sort of that kind of dynamic. But as I started to look at how much more of a focus there's been on visual, I would say over the past probably 3 or 4 years, between people being on different platforms that are visually focused or doing more video content and video stuff like this and all these different types of things. The aspect of like having an image has become that much more important. So throwing up an image from a number of years ago, or just sort of saying like, okay, well, this image will be enough, uh, isn't nearly as good as it used to be. Like it used to be, you didn't really need to worry about this stuff because not a lot of people were doing visual. It was mostly posts, it was mostly tweets, but now there's a lot of it. There's a lot of a focus on visual in both social as well as a lot of different platforms. If you're speaking, a lot of the time they ask you, they're asking you for a headshot, and then you're on a page with a bunch of other people's headshots, and if your headshot doesn't look very good next to those others, it kind of changes the way that people perceive you. So I think for all of those reasons, I sort of hit this point of saying, okay, I need to do something more serious in regards to this, as opposed to just this sort of general well, these shots will work.
Now, when you say more serious,
Mhm.
what exactly does that mean?
So basically, there's thought behind the photos, and there's variety behind the photos, right? So when you're not serious, you find a friend who has a photography business, or maybe is a good photographer themselves, but in essence what they're going to do is they're going to take you to a park, or they're going to take you somewhere. They're going to shoot like one or two headshots because for them they're usually off like shooting weddings or something else that's making them all of their money. So a lot of time you get this kind of stock, um, you know, I would say like kind of one step above the like Sears photo kind of, kind of scenario, you know, uh,
Sears, love
because
it.
it's not like you're getting lots of, it's not like you're getting lots of shots out of those experiences. And even if you are, you're still in one room. You're probably not changing outfits. You're probably, just in some like random place doing, some very, very quick, photos. And that's not, honestly, that's not serious, right? Like if you're not changing clothes and having sort of multiple looks, or in, different locations, or at least different parts of the room, it's not really serious. It's I got to get this done quickly. It's like, oh crap, I need a passport photo, so I'm gonna like throw this sheet up and and try to
Oh,
figure it out.
okay, so we're hearing passport photos. We're hearing Sears. You're crushing my morning by hearing all of these painful places that people go to get these kinds of photos.
Oh yeah, yeah, yep,
But that is that is an absolutely important point to bring up, because a lot of people do not understand the value that they're actually investing in. They just are following the crowd, see what everybody else does, and they kind of allow themselves the space to think it's not that important. I can get away with what I have and we'll call it a day, and I'll focus on other aspects of my business, where they don't understand or recognize the opportunity that branded lifestyle portraiture affords them, because it gets them in front of the people that they serve in a way that presents them so powerfully and confidently and interestingly.
hmm
Um, and speaking to the portrait piece, with respect to you had said something about getting people in the that shoot you that could be specialists in other areas, or
yep.
they're not even professionals at all. What do you feel is the value behind hiring a photographer that is specifically niched to serve people such as yourselves in the, speaker, consultant, thought leader, if you will, kind of world?
Yeah, well, I think they're not, you know, it's not going to be paint by number. I think that if you're dealing with somebody who it's not their industry, or it's not their world, they're not necessarily thinking about what kind of content are you going to be creating with this, or how this is going to look. They're thinking about, oh, it will look good enough. And I think that's a major difference when you're dealing with somebody who is focused in that area. You're going to just see a lot of things that people who are not focused in that area won't see, in terms of, oh, you're going to need to have different looks, right? You're going to need to have moments of you doing things and being in action. You're going to need to find, like, what are all the different expressions that you make, and which of those expressions communicate which type of sentiment, right? What is that professional looking shot that is good for uh, a page of speakers, versus the shot that if somebody reaches out to you and they want to do an interview for a magazine, like, what is the shot that they're going to be able to use for that cover, or for that like splash page of the interview. And
Yes.
people who are not focused in that field, they're not going to think about that. They're going to think, I want to make sure that you look good. They're going to think, I want to make sure that there is a shot of you that is clear, that it's not fuzzy. Like, they're going to think about all the technical stuff, but they're not going to necessarily think about a lot of the emotional stuff, and they're not necessarily going to think a lot about the versatility of the photo.
Yeah. And that's a huge piece, versatility of the photo. One of the things that I've noticed within the speaker coach author community is that there's a ton of beautiful work out there. I mean, stuff looks absolutely phenomenal. And as a photographer, I can appreciate the level of artistry and aesthetics that are present in these images. The challenge that I have looking at these images and saying, well, these are valuable in the sense of how they're being leveraged, is that they're all vanity driven, and you hit that nail on the head already. They're vanity driven images where the only piece that the photographers are thinking about is making sure that the client looks good. And while that is important, it's simply a foundational element. It's a piece of the pie. But what really takes these images to the next level is by including that emotional component that you talked about, that versatility component that you talked about, being able to use these images not just on a website, but you can use them as your social profile images. You can use them as thumbnails for your blog. You can use them for all the advertising that you do, for printed materials, all of these different things. So a lot of photographers that are hired to shoot these speakers, these coaches and these authors are thinking about making them look good, but they don't think about the end use.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think about the way in which these images are used. And as far as you're concerned with the images that you have,
Mm-hmm.
we talked a lot about the end use for you,
Mm-hmm.
and we went over the different things. As of right now, how have you been leveraging your branded lifestyle portraits?
Yeah. So most of the time when I would post an article or just sort of my thoughts on social, I would either not post a picture at all, um,
I
post a
remember.
yep, post a GIF,
Yeah. Yep.
or something of that nature. And now what I do is I kind of go back through the photos and I think like which of these photos could communicate what I'm talking about, or just actually get attention. And I'm not necessarily the type of person who loves to be out front all the time in terms of it can sometimes feel very ego driven to be like, here's a photo of me, kind of sentiment. But because these are not photos that are just those headshots of sort of like straight on, because they're of me teaching, or they're of me sitting and contemplating something, or any number of those things, it feels less like I'm throwing up a picture of myself. It feels like I'm putting a picture up that shows the sentiment of maybe the mood or the feeling that I have when I'm writing this particular article, or when I'm writing this particular post. And I just find that from an engagement standpoint, more people either end up commenting or liking or paying attention because it's a photo as opposed to just like a stock photo that they've seen before, or any number of these other things that start to pop up.
Yeah. And that's the phrase that I love to use is visual punctuation, which is exactly what you just described. And it is probably the most important aspect of any image. It's meant to visually punctuate a sentiment of whatever it is that you're trying to convey to those that you serve,
Mhm.
even in a headshot, because that is the first thing that people are introduced to you. And when you see that image, you have an immediate reaction within you. As humans, we have a reaction within 7 seconds. 7 seconds, we will determine whether or not I want to talk to that person or not. And when they don't have a photo, I generally ignore them.
Yeah.
Now, do you do the same thing with that? When someone posts or kind of contacts you and they
Mhm.
have zero photos, how
Yeah.
do you react to that?
I mean, I'm most of the time I'm first questioning if they're real, right? Because
Yep.
there have been a lot of instances of fake profiles being created. So when you're just seeing that like shadow, image that they create for LinkedIn or for Facebook or any of these
Yeah.
places, you're like, okay, is this a real person first? And then a lot of the time, what I'll do is I'll search and I'll try to see, like, is this person real? Like, do they, and if they don't have any images, I'm always asking the question why. Like, what would be the reason why you wouldn't put your image up? Like, what's the deal there? Like, what's actually going on? So I'm always kind of uh very, I guess you could say, suspicious of anything that comes my way where there's no image of the individual, because I question, especially in today's world, whether or not they're real or they're a bot, right? Or if they've taken the time to, present themselves in any particularly professional way.
Yeah. So essentially, it comes down to a question of trust. Do I trust that this profile is even worth my time to engage for even one round of emails, or
Hmm.
one direct message, or one piece, like to even read anything that would be on their feed?
Hmm.
You know, so it once again encapsulates the importance of creating image content that draws people in, that
Yeah.
gets them interested, that gets them curious to know more about you. Um, and it's something that I notice a lot, especially on LinkedIn recently. It's been really weird, like all
Hmm.
these shadow faces.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't. It's amazing to me that that still is a thing, but
Yeah.
I guess it is what it is. Um, but speaking to something you said before about the balance between getting attention and not feeling too ego driven.
Yep.
I think that that's something that will resonate with a lot of people, because I've run into it with a lot of people during consultation calls where they'll talk to me about the fact that, you know, I'm a speaker, or I'm selling a book, or I have a coaching program and I have this gigantic community, yet at the same time the last thing that I want to do is post images of myself or create this whole thing, and because I don't want to be the person out front.
Hmm.
The challenge with that is you are your brand. You
Yeah.
are the face. You're the go-to person, the authority, and you're presenting yourself in a way to kind of build and amass this community and make it grow even more.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of work with that inner kind of
Sure.
tension that you have with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it really comes down to a lot of the time when we push away from something, it's usually because we've had a bad experience with something else. So, most of us have probably had an experience with someone who has been very good at branding themselves and
Hmm.
who will do like a big photo or a big, photo shoot, and we'll see their big, photo shoot, and we'll think, oh my God, that's so, that's so full of ego and that's so overblown and all these different types of things that
Yep.
often will kind of go to the other end of the spectrum and be like, well, I'm not going to put any photos up of myself because that's, that's like that person who sort of has the big ego. But the fact of the matter is, if we're not putting it out there, then people don't know what we look like. People don't know what we're thinking. They're not let into sort of who we are, right? And a lot of those photos will capture, elements of your personality that may not come through in a simple headshot, right? So, um, being able to show that, it can be a challenge at first, but the other piece of it is that after a while you start to get a little more used to it, and you start feeling like it's totally fine to have a photo of myself out there. It's not that big of a deal, and you get more comfortable kind of as you go along, as you kind of go through that process. But it's that initial getting over that initial hump of, um, I don't want to be like so and so. I think that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but I was a person that struggled in that way too. And it was because of you
Hmm.
that I actually started doing that. And I'm a photographer who deals with photos every single day. And the last thing that I wanted to do was put myself out there.
Hmm.
I always felt that the marketing need for me was to present everybody else's work, but never really talk about the me behind all of the work.
Yep.
And you basically browbeat me to the point that I finally did it. And it has made a gigantic difference with me, and by extension, now all of the people that I work with, because it is absolutely essential. And it's a core piece of value that these portrait sessions offer, because it's that variety and that versatility that does allow you to put yourself out there in a way that is not so cringeworthy or so oh my God, another photo of me, I can't stand it. But when you think about it within the context of allowing yourself the opportunity to get in front of the people that need your help, well, then it becomes more about them and less about you. And the ego then dissolves to an extent that you're not even thinking about it in that way anymore.
Yeah.
So, it, but it's a process and it's
Oh yeah.
challenging, and a lot of people avoid it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Now, with respect to other people listening to this, other people that are similar in your space, what what would you say to them to motivate them to change their mind from seeing image content as a nice to have to a direct need?
I think you have to look at the the changing landscape. Uh, the fact of the matter is, the the world of social specifically has gone to visual. Visual is the thing that is getting people's attention now. It's harder and harder to get people to look at things with text.
Yeah.
So if you are still hiding behind a lot of text and not having any images of yourself, then there are going to be people who are putting those images out there who are going to just get more attention because it's happening much more naturally right now. Visual is becoming a very, very important piece of all of this. So I think that if you're not doing this, then other people are capitalizing on it and probably getting client opportunities out of it that you could be getting, right? Um, because their images are getting attention for sort of multiple reasons. You know, in some cases, like you write a piece of content, people can comment on the content and be like, "That's a great, you know, that's a great piece of content," or "Oh, I never thought about it like that," you know, etc. But when you add an image to that content, what's happening is now you get people who like it or comment on it just because of the photo sometimes. And it's just accruing more likes, more attention, more ideas, etc. So you're bringing more people to your ideas and to your stuff, which if they're commenting and if they're talking to you or if they're, you know, they're reaching out, it likely means that you can follow up with those people and those are potential clients for you. Uh, you know, so
Yeah.
that's the way I kind of see it.
So, long story short, with these images in tow, and you're leveraging them, it becomes a way for you to develop relationships with those that you serve,
Hmm.
to have them see you in a way that they wouldn't see you if you just hid behind text, and to actually promote that text by visually punctuating those stories so that it gives people the motivation to stop on the feed, look at the post, read it, and then follow through on the call to action at the bottom.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The image is sometimes people are scrolling and the image makes them stop and think, well, what's the story behind the image? Especially if the image is in this realm of like it's just you making kind of a strange face or it's you in a, you know, section of a room or it's you doing something. They want to know, is there a specific story behind that image? So sometimes they're more likely to actually read as a result of that curiosity of the story, whereas if you're doing text, you're really depending on the headline getting their attention. And if there's a picture above you and a picture below you in a feed, then both of those are going to get the attention no matter how good your headline is.
Right, right. And ultimately people will just skip on along until they find something cool to look at and
Yep.
just go in right there.
Yep.
Yeah. So where do you see yourself leveraging these images outside of the social realm? Do you see yourself leveraging them for the website, for
Yeah,
putting
yeah, I
blogs?
definitely think that I've got I've had a lot of sort of transitions over the over the past couple of years, and one of those is looking at what am I doing with the current website, right? And sort of which direction am I going to go with that? And these are images that I can see definitely being part of that new version, right? Because they're images of me, whereas there's not very many images of me on the current site, right? So I can see that. I can see a lot of these for when people reach out and they want me to speak for something, or they want me to, do some kind of presentation. These are images that it's easy to kind of go through and say, okay, well, what's really a good fit for this homepage, or for this page that's like all of these other speakers, or for this page where this person's going to do an interview, and they need sort of multiple photos for that interview and things like that. So yeah, um, there's lots of other areas where these photos can be used.
Now, you kind of have some kind of a game plan with respect how to leverage these, and you currently are using them in various posts that you put on social. Now, let's say there's someone who has an idea of who they are and who they serve, but they're not quite sure exactly where they fit yet. Now, with those types of people, and I've actually worked with several of these people, but I wanted to get your take on this.
Mhm.
Do you feel that it is absolutely necessary to have a chapter and verse locked in strategy that you need to have before you invest in the images, or is it something that you can kind of work on with a photographer who is familiar with strategizing and this kind of the way in which someone in their space as that type of an expert would leverage these images? Would it be okay for them to kind of just go through the process and have these images ready to go when they're ready, or is it something that they need to wait for?
Yeah. I don't think you need to wait. I think it's one of those things where, as long as you have a pretty good sense of yourself, of what your brand is, and sort of where you land, I think you're totally fine with doing these with doing these images, because the thing is, your game plan for all of this is going to change depending on what's actually happening in the market, what's happening in your worlds, all the different things that are coming up. So, I encounter a lot of people who basically go through what I like to refer to as polishing the car but never driving it, where they're constantly sort of ad,
I love
ad,
that.
adjusting and trying to fix something and trying to make it perfect and trying to get it, to where they want it to be. But when you're in that phase of basically just trying to sort of like fix everything so that it'll be perfect, you just the ultimate realization that you're going to have is that it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be what you want it to be. It's never going to be what you saw in your head. So it's more about, if you've got a decent enough understanding of where you're at, you start getting your stuff out there. You start doing things, because the market's going to give you more information about what's working and what's not, and that side of things.
So, in other words, stop waiting around and start getting in front of the camera.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that's a great way to end this. That's a wonderful, wonderful sentiment that I 100% agree with.
Awesome.
Might be a little biased, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
But either way, thank you for sharing all those wonderful insights, Mike. I really
yeah.
appreciate it.
My pleasure.